There are certain moments in life when language stops being enough, when love is no longer carried through conversations, promises, or explanations, but through something far more subtle and far more real. Welcome back, dear soul. Because what we are stepping into tonight is one of the deepest mysteries of the human heart. How a man shows that he is in love with you without ever saying it out loud is not a simple question. It is a silent code, a hidden emotional language that most people spend their entire lives failing to decode. And it may be that someone has already been loving you in complete silence while you are still waiting for the words to arrive. Stay here with me until the end, because what you are about to understand may completely shift the way you interpret love from this moment forward. A man who truly loves you does not always express it in loud or obvious ways. In fact, the deepest forms of love rarely announce themselves. They do not demand attention, they do not perform for validation, and they do not need dramatic displays to exist. Instead, they arrive quietly, almost like rain falling in the middle of the night when the world is asleep and no one is watching. Modern thinking often conditions people to believe that love must always be spoken clearly, constantly shown and proven through endless attention or emotional declarations, but human connection has never been that simple. Real love existed long before language did. Before human beings learned to speak, they learned to stay close, to protect what mattered, to endure silently, and to carry responsibility for someone without needing to explain it. And this is exactly why so many people misunderstand love today. Because they are listening only for words, while missing the fact that a man's entire emotional world may already be communicating through his behavior, his presence, and even the quiet energy he carries when you are near him. From a Jungian truths perspective, what we are drawn to in others often reflects something deeper within our own unconscious mind. Love is never just surface-level attraction. It is also psychological recognition. When a man genuinely falls in love, something ancient and instinctive begins to awaken within him. His perception shifts without him even realizing it. Suddenly, your happiness starts to matter to him in a very personal way. It is not just concern, it becomes emotional involvement. When you are upset, he does not simply observe it. He feels it in a way that is difficult for him to explain. It is as if your emotional state starts echoing inside him, even when nothing has been said. And yet, he may never put these feelings into words. Not because they are not real, but because many men were never taught how to translate emotion into language. From an early age, a lot of them were conditioned to believe that expressing vulnerability is weakness, that silence is strength, and that emotions should be controlled rather than revealed. So instead of speaking what they feel, they often express it through action, through consistency, through presence, through small, almost invisible choices that only make sense when you look at the bigger pattern of their behavior. A man like this may not always say, "I love you," but he shows up when it matters. He remembers details you never thought were important. He adjusts his behavior around your emotional state without announcing it. He stays connected even when distance would be easier. And most importantly, he does not disappear when things become emotionally real. Because for him, love is not a performance. It is a quiet alignment, a steady internal decision that does not need constant validation to exist. And if you pay attention closely enough, you begin to notice that his silence is not emptiness. It is fullness without language. But real love, the kind that runs deeper than appearance or words, always finds a way to show itself. It slips through the eyes, reveals itself in behavior, and turns even the smallest everyday moments into emotional signals that language could never fully capture. One of the clearest signs of this silent love is presence rather than performance. There is a real difference between the two. Many people can perform attention, but very few can genuinely be present. A man who is in love feels drawn toward your existence in a way he cannot easily explain. It is not forced, it is not calculated, it simply happens. He starts noticing things most people would miss. Small details you once mentioned in passing. Subtle changes in your tone or mood before you even explain them. When you are hurting, his attention sharpens immediately, as if something inside him becomes unsettled. Even without speaking, his focus naturally returns to you again and again. This kind of presence is not something that can be maintained artificially. It is not an act. It grows from emotional attachment, not temporary attraction. And over time, it becomes obvious in the way he looks at you during the most ordinary moments, not the carefully staged moments, not when you are trying to impress anyone, but during the quiet, unguarded seconds of life. A man who loves you in silence often watches you when you are not paying attention, not out of obsession, but because your presence creates a strange sense of emotional calm within him. It feels like your existence gives his mind somewhere safe to rest. And when a man finds peace in someone's presence, he begins to protect it instinctively. Even his eyes change. There is a softness that appears only when he is around the person his inner world trusts without question. There is something deeply spiritual in the silence of a man who loves intensely but does not express it easily. Often he is not silent because he feels nothing, but because he feels too much. Real love can be overwhelming for him. It touches places inside him that were never meant to be exposed. Many men carry an internal fear of emotional vulnerability. It is not the absence of feeling that holds them back, but the fear of what happens when those feelings are seen. Love gives another person emotional access, and for someone who has experienced rejection, abandonment, or emotional neglect in the past, that access can feel dangerous. So even while he moves closer to you emotionally, another part of him resists. One side wants connection, closeness, and honesty. The other side is afraid of the consequences of opening up completely. That quiet internal struggle creates a kind of intensity you can feel even when nothing is being said. You may also notice how love begins to change his behavior in practical ways. He starts adjusting his time without announcing it. He reorganizes priorities without making it a statement. He becomes more patient in situations where he used to be distant or distracted. Slowly, your world starts to matter to him in ways that influence his everyday choices. And the most important part is that real love does not keep score. He is not constantly reminding you of what he does or what he sacrifices. His actions are not transactions meant to be noticed. They are expressions of emotional instinct. Love, in its purest form, gives without needing recognition. That is why some of the strongest signs of love happen quietly, in private moments where no audience exists. Pay close attention to how he responds when life becomes difficult for you. Attraction often fades when difficulty arrives, but love becomes most visible in those very moments. A man who silently loves you is emotionally affected by your suffering. Even when he cannot fix everything, he feels an internal pull to remain close to you while you go through it. He checks on you. He becomes more protective in subtle ways. His energy shifts the moment he senses that you are emotionally drained. And sometimes his silence grows heavier, not because he is indifferent, but because he wishes he could take your pain and carry it himself. Many men are not taught how to give emotional comfort through words. So instead, they communicate love through practical support, physical presence, and quiet loyalty. The world may not always label these actions as romantic, but emotionally, they carry deep meaning. The soul recognizes them instantly, even when language does not. There are men who say, "I love you" daily without truly feeling it, and there are others who never say it at all, yet their entire behavior expresses it consistently. It is visible in how steady they remain when life becomes inconvenient. Anyone can stay when things are easy. But a man who loves you silently remains emotionally connected even through confusion, distance, misunderstandings, and emotional uncertainty. Something inside him keeps returning to you, even when pride suggests walking away, even when fear encourages detachment. There is a deeper emotional pull that prevents full disconnection because love has already taken root at a level he cannot easily undo. One of the strongest indicators of this is emotional awareness. A man in love becomes highly sensitive to your emotional state. He notices when your smile feels slightly off. He hears sadness hidden inside your laughter. He senses emotional shifts long before they are spoken out loud. Love naturally sharpens perception in this way. Your emotional energy begins to affect his inner state. While psychology may explain this through attachment and empathy on a deeper level, it feels almost spiritual. Human beings, at a core level, act as emotional mirrors. And when two people become deeply bonded, they begin to reflect and absorb each other's emotional atmosphere without conscious effort. Sometimes his love is revealed through nervousness or quiet hesitation, through pauses in conversation, through moments where his confidence seems different around you compared to others. Not because he is weak, but because emotional investment changes behavior. Love removes performance and replaces it with authenticity. A man who truly cares begins to feel the weight of your opinion. Your perception of him matters more than he openly admits. Unlike someone who is emotionally detached, he becomes more careful, more aware, and sometimes even slightly unsure because the connection carries meaning for him. There is also a quieter truth that often goes unnoticed. Some men distance themselves not because love is absent, but because they feel unworthy of it. Society often teaches men to measure their value through success, stability, strength, or status. When a man feels he has not reached that internal standard, he may withdraw emotionally while still deeply caring. This creates inner contradiction. He moves closer, then pulls back. He looks at you with depth, yet says nothing. He cares intensely, but hides it behind silence. Inside him, love and insecurity begin to struggle in private conflict. But real love never stays invisible forever. It always leaves traces. Pay attention to how he protects your dignity when you are not around. Notice whether he respects your emotional and physical boundaries without needing reminders. Observe whether he listens closely when you speak about your dreams, your fears, or the parts of your past you rarely share. Because there is a clear difference between desire and love. Desire focuses on possession. Love focuses on understanding. A man who truly loves you wants access to the parts of you that are not visible on the surface. Your fears, your wounds, your memories, your quiet sadness, the emotional layers beneath what you show to the world. Because for him, emotional intimacy slowly becomes more important than physical attraction. And one of the most revealing signs of all is memory. A man who is emotionally connected remembers moments tied to feeling. The human brain naturally stores emotionally significant experiences with greater intensity, and love strengthens that effect even further. When a man loves deeply, even the smallest moments connected to you stop feeling ordinary in his inner world. What once would have been just passing details in everyday life slowly turns into something emotionally meaningful. A random conversation that seemed casual at the time, a song playing quietly in the background while you were both present, the way you smiled without thinking in a specific moment, or even the sound of your voice on a day when life felt heavy. None of these things remain as they are. They are no longer just events. They become impressions, emotional markers, subtle imprints that settle into his memory in a way that logic cannot fully explain or erase. And over time, something interesting happens inside him. Without consciously trying to remember, he begins to recall moments you have completely forgotten, things you never considered important. A short interaction from months ago, a passing comment you made without thinking, a small gesture that, to you, had no weight at all. Yet for him, it stayed alive. Not because he decided to hold on to it, but because emotional attachment does that. It preserves what the heart recognizes as meaningful, even when the mind does not label it as important. This is one of the quieter signs of emotional depth. Memory becomes selective through feeling, not through effort. A silent lover, or a man who expresses love in a restrained way, is also deeply protective of your emotional world. His concern may not always come in obvious declarations or repeated affirmations, but it shows in behavior that is steady and thoughtful. He becomes uncomfortable seeing you drained by environments or people who consistently reduce your energy or disturb your peace. Even if he does not confront everything directly, his awareness of your emotional state remains active. He notices shifts in your mood. He pays attention to your exhaustion. He registers when something feels off in you, even if you do not fully express it. And slowly, this creates a pattern. He begins to encourage your direction in life, not in a controlling way, but in a supportive one. His care shows up in subtle alignment with your well-being. He wants you to feel safe, not restricted. He wants you to grow, not shrink. Over time, his behavior starts to reflect a quiet responsibility toward your emotional stability. Because when a man truly loves someone, control stops feeling satisfying. What becomes satisfying instead is your peace, your comfort, your emotional balance. Real affection does not try to dominate the inner world of another person. It tries to support it. It gives space for breathing, for individuality, for emotional freedom. Many people confuse loud attention with real devotion. Attention can be intense, visible, and emotionally stimulating, but it is often temporary. It can appear quickly and disappear just as fast. What reveals truth is consistency, because consistency is not about emotion in a single moment. It is about emotion that continues through time, through repetition, through ordinary days that carry no excitement or reward. Anyone can show interest when things feel new, but not everyone remains emotionally present when life becomes repetitive, quiet, stressful, or even emotionally distant. A man who truly loves you does not depend on emotional highs to stay connected. His attachment does not collapse when stimulation disappears. Instead, it continues quietly in the background of ordinary life, steady and unchanged. And in that steadiness, something deeper becomes visible. The idea of destiny, in its most grounded form, is rarely dramatic. It is not always made of intense moments or overwhelming signs. More often, it is built through endurance, through the ability to remain connected even when nothing extraordinary is happening, through the willingness to stay emotionally present in both clarity and uncertainty. Sometimes, his love appears through small actions that do not draw attention but carry meaning within them. He naturally walks on the side of safety when you are together. He checks if you arrived home without making it feel like surveillance. He notices when you feel cold and adjusts without needing instruction. He moves closer when your energy shifts into discomfort. These gestures might look simple from the outside, but psychologically they reflect protective attachment patterns. Care, when it is genuine, often expresses itself through action before it ever becomes language. And over time, these patterns form a quiet language of their own. There is also a kind of silence that exists only between two people who are emotionally aligned. It is not the silence of distance or discomfort. It is the silence of ease, the kind where nothing feels pressured to be filled, where presence itself feels enough. A man in love often becomes drawn to this kind of stillness. He does not always need activity or constant conversation. He may simply want to exist near you, without expectation, without performance. Because when emotional connection becomes real, presence stops feeling empty. It begins to feel complete. This is something many people overlook in a world where connection is often measured by stimulation, messages, reactions, constant interaction, visible effort. Modern understanding of love is often shaped by intensity rather than depth, yet real emotional attachment is frequently quieter. It feels stable, grounded, like emotional shelter after long periods of instability. For someone who has experienced emotional chaos before, this kind of calm can even feel unfamiliar at first. The nervous system, used to unpredictability, may misinterpret stability as boredom. This is why emotional healing often becomes necessary before a person can fully recognize healthy love when it appears in front of them. Without inner calm, peace can feel unfamiliar rather than comforting. A man who silently loves you also tends to show up during your lowest moments, not only during your brightest ones. He does not disappear when life becomes heavy or complicated. Even if he cannot find perfect words, he remains present. And presence during emotional difficulty carries a significance that is difficult to overstate, because many people naturally withdraw when discomfort appears. So when someone stays close during your suffering without needing to escape it, it reveals something deeply genuine within them. It shows emotional endurance, not just attraction. There are also moments when you may notice him looking at you with a quiet intensity that is difficult to describe, a mixture of admiration, awareness, and emotional weight, as if he understands that deep connection always carries vulnerability. The more someone matters, the more the fear of losing them quietly exists in the background. Some men do not express this fear openly. They carry it internally, shaping their actions with caution and care. They love carefully, not because they feel less, but because they feel more deeply than they show. Psychologically, love also begins to reshape masculine behavior in subtle but noticeable ways. A man who is emotionally attached often becomes more future-oriented. His thinking starts to shift towards stability, responsibility, and long-term emotional grounding. Even if he never articulates it directly, his internal planning begins to include you. Decisions are no longer made in isolation. You become part of his mental landscape, integrated into how he imagines time moving forward. This is what can be called unconscious inclusion, when someone becomes part of a person's future thinking without formal acknowledgement. Some men express love more through action than language because emotional expression was never fully taught to them in words. Instead, they communicate care through usefulness, through consistency, through problem-solving, through quiet support. Fixing what is broken, helping without announcement, staying steady when things become complicated. Their love is not always spoken, but it is demonstrated through reliability. And then there is a deeper layer still. A man who truly loves you makes you feel more like yourself, not less. His presence does not create pressure to perform or maintain a certain version of yourself. It does not require emotional masking or constant adjustment. Instead, you feel allowed to relax into your natural state, to be real without fear of judgment. Because genuine love does not reduce identity, it restores it. It brings back parts of you that may have been lost through past emotional experiences. It quietly reminds you of who you were before fear shaped the way you connected with others. If you observe closely, you begin to understand that love is not always located in grand expressions or dramatic confessions. More often, it exists in patience, in consistency, in emotional presence during ordinary days, in quiet sacrifice, in small gestures that repeat over time, and in the subtle softness of someone's attention that never fully shifts away from you. And perhaps one of the reasons silent love feels so powerful is because it originates more from depth than from display. Ego seeks recognition. It wants to be seen, acknowledged, validated. But deeper emotional connection often seeks something different entirely. It seeks closeness, understanding, and continuity. In a world filled with noise, where attention is constantly performed and intimacy is often mistaken for visibility, real love continues to exist in quieter forms. It does not always announce itself. It does not always need validation. It simply continues. And maybe that is why this understanding resonates so strongly. Because at some level, it feels familiar, recognizable, true in a way that does not need explanation. Not every form of love is meant to be loud, to be real. Sometimes the deepest truth is carried inside silence, consistency, and devotion that does not demand to be witnessed in order to exist. And loving someone after emotional pain adds another layer to this experience. Many people carry invisible emotional imprints from the past, betrayals, disappointments, abandonment, or trust that was broken in ways that were never fully healed. So when someone begins to open again, to trust again, to remain present in steady and quiet ways, that in itself carries meaning. It becomes part of emotional repair, because love after pain is not fragility, it is courage expressed slowly. And perhaps this is what real connection ultimately is. Not perfection, not fantasy, not constant intensity, but two imperfect individuals gradually finding emotional safety in each other. Two nervous systems learning calm in shared presence. Two inner worlds beginning to communicate beyond words, beyond fear, beyond ego-driven reactions. And when this kind of connection enters someone's life, something subtle but permanent shifts within them. The urgency to chase begins to fade. The need to constantly prove worth slowly dissolves. The anxiety of being chosen or not chosen loses its grip. And what remains is something much quieter and more stable, the feeling of being genuinely seen. So instead of searching only for words, there is value in noticing what is already being communicated through actions, through consistency, through presence, through quiet loyalty that does not fluctuate with mood or circumstance. Because sometimes the deepest love is not the one that speaks the most. It is the one that continues steadily, even when nothing is being said at all.